I wanted to make this video as like an introduction to Shakespeare really, and to Hamlet before we start the drama unit. If I were there with you, this is what we'd be going over today. I'll give you the shortened version. But first I just want to start talking about Shakespeare. Just that I think he is, misunderstood and hard to understand. And my job, I think, is just to try to make it as easy as possible, and I want to give you all the resources and the tools that I can to help you succeed with this play. So along those lines, I'm not sure how many professors would do this or go along with it, but I am actually giving you a link in your modules, it's already there, to something called No Fear Shakespeare. And it's a really cool, it's basically a tool that you can use where if you click on the link, it'll give you an introduction to the characters and so forth. But when you click onto the actual play within the website, the left-hand side of the screen is the actual Shakespeare language, and then the right-hand side of the screen is the modernized translation of it, so that you can read a scene or an exchange between two characters, and then you can flip to the right-hand side of the screen, and it's put in very kind of modern terms where it's a lot easier to understand. And I know the temptation would, of course, be to only read, the right-hand side of your screen, but I really encourage you to only use this as a supplement, as a tool. The best way to use it is to read the left side of the screen, test yourself, and think, okay, this is what I think is being said, and then test yourself by reading the right-hand side, the modern version. So, you don't have to use the No Fear Shakespeare, but if that's something you're comfortable with, then please do. Now, in class, we will be looking at just our textbook. We're not going to be looking at the modern version at all. So you do need to be comfortable with the original version, and in your essay, you will need to quote from the original version, not the modernized text. So just keep that in mind as you're studying the play. Before we get into the details of it, I just wanted to slow down and talk about Shakespeare in general. A lot of people don't realize, he's a genius. We herald him and talk about him and study his works even today, 400 years later. But why? Why is he such a big deal? Well, I have this really creative way that it's a man named Bernard Levin. He's put together just a very few phrases to show how we still use Shakespearean language today. In fact, Shakespeare is attributed to having created at least 1,700 words or phrases out of thin air. In fact, that's, I think, one that he did. So let me just read this to you. It's just a quick paragraph, but you've probably quoted Shakespeare today, yesterday, at some point. If you declare it's Greek to me, or if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you're quoting Shakespeare. If you've ever refused to budge an inch or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you've played fast and loose, if you've been tongue-tied, a tower of strength, hoodwinked, or in a pickle, if you've insisted on fair play, slept not a wink, if you've seen better days or lived a fool's paradise, you're quoting Shakespeare. If you think it's high time and that the truth will win out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you suspect foul play without rhyme or reason, then to give the devil his due, you're quoting Shakespeare. Even if you bid me good riddance and send me packing, if you wish I was dead as a doornail, if you think I'm an eyesore, a laughingstock, the devil incarnate, or a blinking idiot, then by Jove, for goodness sake, you're quoting Shakespeare. So that's just a clever way to show you how much he's influenced our language. There are so many more examples, from his sonnets and from his plays, where he just invented a phrase or a word and it stuck around. It was just so, what happens is that he's captured an emotion so well, or he's captured human nature so well, that it's just lasted throughout the centuries. So, I'm a big fan of Shakespeare and Shakespeare nerd, and I just really admire, his influence on society, on our language, and so forth. All right, let's shift gears and talk about Hamlet. I know that a few of you have probably read this play before, like in high school or something, so that's actually okay. You're at an advantage, but also, this play is so deep and complex in some ways that one reading is not gonna do it justice. So If it's been a few months or a couple of years since you've read the play, that's actually okay. You know the basics of the plot and the characters probably, but there's so much in here to look at, and it goes so deep that I think you'll really find it a good experience, even the second time around. All right, now Shakespeare wrote this about 400 years ago. It was 1600. This has a lot of famous lines quoted in it: "To be or not to be, neither a borrower nor a lender be." There's another one: "Is a method in my madness." You'll catch as you read several phrases that you already know, you've already heard in your lifetime. You may even use them. All right, so this is how I'll teach Hamlet as we go along. If you look in your reading assignments, I've already kind of divided up the play into segments, and it kind of pans out to about 15 pages per class period. And that's actually a lot of Shakespeare, Again, use the No Fear Shakespeare if that will help you. My best suggestion is keep up with the reading. It's very important you don't get behind for this unit. So, read the assigned reading, get ready for the class where we'll gather together. And what will happen is I'll go ahead and teach over those pages. We'll go over them together carefully. And then if we have time, I'm going to show little movie clips that, like, just the most important ones that pertain to the scenes that we've just gone over. So we'll see how the time works out. And the reason is this: I'll go ahead and say, Shakespeare didn't write his plays for us to sit in a classroom and read them or read them on our own. That's not his original intent. I mean, he wrote these plays in order to be seen, on the stage, and of course later for us on film. There are a lot of, Hamlet choices films. So that's one reason that I would like to show you some important clips throughout the unit. But also, I think it'll help you to get a really good grasp on the characters and on the situations, to see it acted out on the screen. It's important to hear the actors' inflection and to see their faces. It just makes it come alive. And so that's really why I want to give you that experience as well. I just think it's really important that we don't just read it on the page, although that's important too. I think it needs to be seen. That's originally what it needed to be. Okay. All right, one other thing I'd do is, if I were a student in this class, be prepared with the reading. And when you come to class, I know that some of you don't like to write in your books because you're going to sell them back later or whatever, but a pencil, you can use a pencil if you need to. If I point out certain lines that are terribly important, your best bet is go ahead and underline those or make a note of them, because it's going to help you in a couple of ways. One is when you're tested over Hamlet, it'll just help you to be able to study that better, to kind of identify those important lines. But secondly, keep in mind your essay 2, your essay 4, sorry, I got mixed up. Keep in mind your Hamlet essay that's coming up, that you'll write at the end of the unit when we finish, because you're going to be required to pull out quotes from the play to support your points. And so, the better you know the play and the more that you've kind of made some important notes, I think the easier it'll be to find those notes again when you're writing your paper. And also, if you're studying the play and it's just blank, you haven't underlined anything, you're going to have to read the whole play all over again. But if you go back and you've taken really good notes, or you've underlined the best parts of the lines, it's just going to be a lot easier to study. I think that's important too. One more thing about the essay. My best suggestion is, even before you start the play, really, you might even print off the topics that I've got there. Now, you're not required to just use those topics. You can use other topics if you wish. They have to be within, the play's guidelines, of course. But you might keep those topics in mind as you read. I think it's not that you have to write the paper. You kind of need to finish the play before you really start thinking about the paper, but you can at least have those topics in mind as you go, and I think that's going to help you. All right, let's talk about the play itself. Let's get into some details. In your modules, in the Hamlet unit, the drama unit in Canvas, I've put a character tree, so go ahead and click on that really early, even before you start the play. And another suggestion I have is to, copy paste or download somehow that character tree and print it off and stick it in your textbook, really, so that you'll have it as you're reading. It's just really important up front. There are a lot of characters in this play, as there are in every Shakespearean play, but it's important to get to know the characters and know exactly who they are. This is her brother and his father, and just to be able to connect the dots for those characters, it's going to make things a lot less confusing if you're able to go to that character tree and know how these characters are all related, how they, interact, and that sort of thing. So I hope that helps you a little bit. Okay, the basics of the play. I want to give you some background information. The play is set in the Middle Ages in Denmark, in Elsinore Castle. That's the main place where all the action takes place. Now, it's set in the Middle Ages. Most critics agree that that's true. Some, though, think it was kind of set in the Renaissance period. There are even a couple of films. There's an Ethan Hawke movie where it's set in modern day, and they spout Shakespearean language, so that's kind of interesting. I think it's up to your interpretation and the interpretation of the film, too, if that's something you're watching. All right, Hamlet himself. Now, we don't know his exact age. He's in his 30s, I'm guessing, kind of early 30s. But he's home from university when we first meet him in this play. He's what I would call a perpetual student. He just loves to learn. He's taking classes and just constantly in school. So that's kind of how to look at him, I think. Now, it's really important to know where we meet Hamlet. And I'm going to have to give a couple spoilers here before you start. But because behind the scenes, before page 1, some big things have happened to Hamlet. So one of the big things is that his father, who is the king of Denmark, has died. And he's died of a snake bite, is what has been told. And it has been about 6 weeks before page 1. So Hamlet, when we meet Hamlet, he's grieving. He's just lost his father very unexpectedly. The second thing that happened is about a month or so after his father died, his mother, the Queen Gertrude, married his uncle, Claudius. Now, his uncle is the father's brother, so it's not incest or anything like that. However, she got married in weeks after her, the dad died, and married the uncle. So those two things are not sitting well with Hamlet. He's gloomy, he's upset, he's mad, he's grieving, and that's where he gets the nickname the Melancholy Dane. He is not a happy character when we meet him at all. He's just gone through a lot. We don't get to see him go through those things in those 6 weeks, but we get to meet him where he is at that moment. And, it's interesting because we get ideas throughout the play of how he used to be. He used to be pretty carefree. He used to be a really good boyfriend to Ophelia. And those things have all changed. Like, everything changed. He got really dark pretty fast. Oh, I wanted to also bring up, even the critics are not really sure why Hamlet did not just inherit the crown from his father. So his father dies, Hamlet did not instantly become king. What happened was his mother married his uncle, and the uncle became king. So now you have King Claudius and Queen Gertrude, and then Hamlet's still just the prince. And the critics are kind of divided as to why that succession did not happen. Is it just because it was in Denmark and that happened to be what it was like? Or my theory kind of is that Hamlet didn't really care about the crown. He was so grief-stricken. He's not an ambitious person, it doesn't seem like. And so he may not have just wanted the crown at all. I mean, that may be a huge part of it. We're just not sure. It's not terribly important. It's just, maybe that's how Denmark treated the lineage. We don't know. But when we start the play, he is not the king and doesn't seem to want to be the king. He's not bothered by Claudius being king instead of him. He's bothered that Claudius has married his mother. He just feels like a betrayal of both of them on the dad. And so he's very protective of his dad and loyal. Okay. Oh, one more thing about when we meet him, obviously everybody else is carried on with life. And you see Hamlet still wearing dark clothes, still in mourning, and his mother loses patience with him, and so does Claudius. They're just like, kind of get over it. And there's even a scene where it's being called unmanly grief, that he's just hung on to this grief. It's only been 6 weeks, so nobody understands him. He's very misunderstood in this play. He feels very alone in this entire play. Okay, I want to talk about his girlfriend for a second. So Ophelia is Hamlet's girlfriend, and all indications are that they had a good relationship, like a loving, sweet relationship up until now. And the tide turns pretty quickly. You don't see them together very much, and again, I don't want to give too much away, there is a breakup that's involved kind of early on. So things have turned very sour. And I think it's because he can't be a good boyfriend because he can't take care of himself right now. He's again in mourning and all of that. So we'll dive into that as the play goes on. But do just know that it seems that the relationship was good and healthy up until we meet Hamlet. Okay, a couple more things. You might have heard one of the biggest questions and themes of Hamlet is Hamlet quote-unquote mad? You'll see that phrase used a lot in the play. Or is he pretending to be mad? Just kind of keep that in your mind as we read. And that question, I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can give you my theories and what the critics are saying at a certain time. I think it's a complex question. And actually, I want to pause and say, I studied and loved Hamlet, 20, 30 years ago. And then when it popped up in our textbook, say 3 years ago, I was excited to study it. And so as I've been studying it over this time, what I love about the play is it's not definitive. It's not exact. You don't have all the answers. There are just question after question after question. It can be spiritual questions, philosophical questions that Hamlet poses to himself or to the audience, to be or not to be, heavy questions. And then there are questions about characters' motivation. There are going to be sometimes I'll stand there and tell you, I can't tell you why this character did that or why this happened. And I think that Shakespeare wanted there to be a lot of questions that are unanswered. So to me, that's intriguing. It's kind of interesting, and I love that there's not just one answer. Sometimes you can argue this or you can argue that. And remember that these things would make for a great paper. You're welcome to your own interpretation of this play, as always, as long as you can back it up with the text. I'm always open to that. All right, couple more things. Oh, just to hone in again on the questions, there was just one more thing that, Hamlet has 7 different soliloquies during this play, and they're all very deep, and they ask the basic core questions about life and death and love and the afterlife. And I think that's actually why this play has endured so much. It's really risen to the top of Shakespeare's plays because they're eternal questions that we are still asking centuries later, and we may or may not even have the answers to them. So I think that makes it intriguing for the audience. And then one more thing before we go, and this is again what for me makes the play so interesting. Hamlet is a very complex character. He is not easy to figure out, and he's not easy to like sometimes. Without giving spoilers, he's a very flawed character. He's going to make some choices and do some things and say some things that are not very flattering to him. Now, sometimes there's a reason for it, and sometimes there's not. And I think that's what makes, again, this play so interesting is he is not an easy character to figure out. He's just not. And so I hope that you enjoy the play. I hope that it's something that you will invest time in. And I think if you give it the time and energy that it deserves, I think that it will be a good outcome for you. I think that you will hopefully enjoy it and get something out of it for yourself. That's my hope. So, all right, well, that's my introduction. I can't wait to dive into the play with you, so I will be seeing you next time. Okay, bye.